Clara's champagne glass cracked just as her husband kissed her best friend beneath the chandelier. The crystal stem snapped between her fingers, cold wine slipping over her wrist and darkening the cuff of her ivory dress. Around her, the Hospital Foundation gala glittered with donor plaques, silver trays, and women wrapped in silk. A string quartet played near the marble staircase, but one violin faltered when people noticed where Clara was looking. Ethan stood beside the auction stage with his hand at Vanessa's waist. Not hovering, not accidental. Familiar. Vanessa's garnet lipstick had left a faint mark beside his mouth. "Clara," Ethan said, releasing her friend with the slow annoyance of a man interrupted at dinner. Vanessa adjusted the diamond pendant Clara had helped Ethan choose 3 months earlier, believing it was intended for his mother. Its stones caught the chandelier light and scattered it across the white orchids. "We were going to tell you after tonight," Vanessa murmured. Her perfume reached Clara first. Orange blossom and amber, the same scent that had lingered in Ethan's car while he blamed a new air freshener. A few feet away, surgeons lowered their glasses. Trustees examined the auction catalog as if it contained urgent diagnoses. Clara set the broken stem on a waiter's tray. A thin red line crossed her palm, but she closed her fingers before anyone could see it. "How long?" Her voice barely disturbed the music. Ethan straightened his tuxedo cuff. "Does the number change anything?" That answer did. It rewrote the late shifts he had accused her of choosing over him. The weekends Vanessa had appeared with takeout and sympathetic eyes, the messages that stopped whenever Clara entered a room. Vanessa had sat at their kitchen island, drinking from Clara's favorite blue mug, while Ethan complained that his wife came home smelling of antiseptic instead of perfume. Clara looked at the pendant again. "You wore it here." Vanessa's hand rose protectively to the diamonds. Ethan stepped between them, mistaking stillness for weakness. "Don't make a scene. These people fund your department." There it was, not remorse, but leverage. Her career laid carefully across his sentence like a blade. A donor nearby pretended not to listen while his wife leaned closer. The quartet continued, softer now, beneath the low electrical hum of whispers. Ethan offered Clara a smile polished for photographs. "We've grown apart. You care more about strangers in hospital beds than your own marriage. Vanessa understands the life I'm building." Clara unfolded her fingers. A bead of blood surfaced beneath the ballroom light. Vanessa glanced at it, then away. "And what life is that?" Clara asked. "One where compassion is embarrassing?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "One where my wife doesn't disappear every time someone presses a call button." The words traveled farther than he intended. Across the room, 2 nurses from Clara's unit went rigid. One placed her untouched champagne on a table. Clara removed her wedding ring. For 7 years, its inner edge had left a pale circle on her skin. She did not throw it, slap him, or offer the room the spectacle it wanted. She placed it beside his drink, where the gold made a small, clean sound against the glass. "Then you finally have the wife you deserve." Vanessa's smile vanished. Ethan stared at the ring as though Clara had broken an agreement he assumed only he could violate. She turned toward the exit, her shoes whispering over polished marble, while conversations parted around her. Behind her, Ethan called her name once, sharp, commanding, almost offended. Clara did not stop. Then a hospital pager sounded inside her clutch. One urgent tone, then another. The emergency department needed every available nurse. Clara pressed her bleeding palm into a linen napkin and pushed through the ballroom doors, leaving the diamonds, the whispers, and 2 people who had mistaken her devotion for something they could use against her. In the bright corridor beyond the gala, she accepted the call. "This is Clara," she said, walking faster. "I'm coming." She had lost a husband and a best friend before the elevator arrived. When its steel doors opened, she chose the people who still needed her, and had no idea whose life would be waiting upstairs. The elevator doors opened on a wall of white light and the metallic rattle of a gurney racing across tile. Antiseptic burned beneath the sweeter perfume still clinging to Clara's dress. Unidentified male, early 40s, a paramedic called, collapsed near the ballroom service entrance. "Pulse is weak," and irregular. Clara stepped out of her heels without breaking stride. She left them beside the nurse's station, pulled on blue shoe covers, and tied a disposable gown over black silk. A charge nurse caught sight of the blood soaking through the napkin around Clara's palm. "You need that examined. After he can breathe without us." The patient lay motionless beneath the trauma lights, broad shoulders cutting a severe line under his torn-open dress shirt. A charcoal tuxedo jacket had been folded onto a chair. Its bespoke label and platinum cuff links suggested wealth, but the monitor reduced him to the same fragile rhythm as everyone else. No identification, no family, only a silver watch and a face the nurses recognized without knowing from where. Clara took her place at his right side. The room filled with clipped orders, tearing wrappers, and the steady hiss of oxygen. When his blood pressure dropped, the physician requested a medication from the emergency cart. Clara lifted the vial, read the label twice, then looked at the patient's wrist, where a red medical alert band had been fastened by the paramedics. "Stop!" The word landed harder than a shout. The physician's gloved hand paused. "He has a documented severe reaction to that drug," Clara said, turning the band toward the light. "It could make the collapse worse." For 1 second, only the monitor spoke. Then the physician checked the band and changed the order. Clara prepared the alternative, her injured palm stinging each time she pressed the syringe plunger. Minutes tightened around them. The patient's pulse steadied by degrees, each electronic tone arriving cleaner than the last. When his eyelids finally moved, Clara leaned close enough for him to hear, without forcing him to fight the oxygen mask. "You're in the emergency department. Don't try to sit up. You're safe." His eyes opened, gray, sharp, and disconcertingly controlled for a man who had nearly died. They moved from her face to the blood seeping through her glove. "Your hand," he murmured. "Not the priority." His gaze stayed on her, as though people rarely contradicted him and almost never dismissed their own pain in his presence. A security officer entered carrying a leather wallet recovered from the service corridor. The charge nurse opened it, then looked twice at the identification. Her posture changed. "This is Adrian Vale." The name passed through the room in a low current. Vale Meridian's aloof chief executive, the foundation's largest private donor, famous for avoiding photographs, interviews, and nearly everyone who wanted something from him. Clara did not glance at the card. She adjusted his oxygen tubing and checked his pulse again. "In this room, he's my patient." Adrian heard her. Something unreadable shifted behind his eyes. The physician ordered him admitted for observation, and the team began preparing his transfer. Only then did Clara peel away her stained glove. The cut across her palm had reopened, bright against skin gone pale beneath the fluorescent lights. Adrian raised one unsteady hand and closed his fingers around her wrist before she could turn away. The gesture was weak but deliberate. "What is your name?" "Clara." "Clara what?" The charge nurse answered while wrapping Clara's hand in gauze. "Clara Bennett, one of our best nurses." Adrian released her only when the transport team unlocked the gurney. His face returned to its cool, remote stillness, but his next words stopped the wheels. "She comes with me," he said. The physician began to explain staffing assignments. Adrian looked only at Clara. "Or I don't leave this room." For the first time that night, someone powerful was not asking Clara to become smaller. He was placing his life in her hands. The gurney wheels clicked over each seam in the polished floor, their rhythm sharp beneath the low mechanical hum of the private cardiac wing. Cold air smelled of antiseptic and rain drifting through the ambulance bay doors as Clara walked beside Adrian, one gauzed hand held above her waist and the other steadying his monitor cables. At the elevator, the nursing supervisor stepped into their path. "Clara, another nurse will take over." Her eyes dropped to the blood beginning to bloom through the gauze. "You need treatment, and Mr. Vale needs someone assigned to this floor." Clara stopped the gurney herself. Adrian's fingers tightened against the white blanket, but she met his gaze before he could speak. "You trusted me in the emergency room," she said. "Trust me now. I cannot be your private nurse because you demanded it. Your care follows hospital protocol, not your influence." The elevator chimed behind them. Two security officers stood near the brushed steel doors, silent in dark suits, while the transport team waited for the order to move. Adrian was accustomed to rooms bending around his name. This one did not. "Then what do you recommend, Nurse Bennett?" he asked. "Approprié Andoff. Full disclosure of what you were given, continuous cardiac monitoring, and no medication without a second verification until the pharmacy review is complete." Clara turned to the supervisor. "I'll stay through admission because I witnessed the reaction and caught the contraindication. After that, the floor nurse takes over." The supervisor studied her for a moment, then nodded. 30 minutes. Inside Adrian's suite, amber lights softened the steel rails and pale oak cabinets, but the air remained cool enough to raise goose flesh along Clara's arms. She delivered the report without missing a dosage or timestamp. When the floor nurse repeated every instruction correctly, Clara signed the handoff and set down the tablet. "Your care is transferred." Adrian watched her step toward the door. "You're leaving." That was the agreement. Most people change their agreements when they learn who I am. Clara glanced at the 4-line, then at the monitor, tracing a steadier green rhythm. "Your name does not change your pulse." A nearly invisible shift touched his mouth. Not quite a smile, but the memory of one. Then his gaze settled on her bandaged palm. "Sit down. That is not a medical request." No, his voice lost its boardroom edge. "It's concern." The word hung between them, quieter than the monitor. Clara reached for the door handle. Her wedding ring was no longer there to catch the light, yet the pale indentation around her finger remained. Adrian saw it. He did not ask. Instead, he pressed the call button and requested a physician for Clara's hand. When she refused to become his patient, he did something no one in the corridor expected. He removed his own leverage. "Then document that I requested you only until the handoff," he told the supervisor. "No implant, no donor pressure. Her assignment remains hers." The supervisor's shoulders eased. Clara's did not. "Why?" she asked. Adrian's eyes returned to the gauze darkening at her palm. "Because you protected me when it could cost you. I won't repay that by costing you more." For the first time, his power had moved away from possession and toward restraint. Clara opened the door, but his voice followed her into the bright corridor. "Tomorrow, when you're off duty, have coffee with me." She turned. "That crosses another boundary." "Yes," Adrian said, calm as winter glass. "Which is why the choice will be entirely yours." Clara closed the door without answering. In her pocket, her phone vibrated against her scrubs. Ethan's name burned across the screen, followed by 6 words. "We need to control this tonight." She silenced the call. Behind the glass, Adrian remained watching, not commanding, not pursuing. Waiting. And for once, the next boundary would not be broken by betrayal. Clara would decide whether to open it herself. The smell of antiseptic and burnt coffee hung beneath the fluorescent lights when the charge nurse placed a sealed incident form on the counter. By then, midnight had thinned the cardiac wing to muted monitors, rubber saws, and rain ticking against the dark windows. Clara read the complaint twice. A donor representative claimed she had acted outside protocol during Adrian Vale's emergency and then behaved inappropriately during his transfer. Pending review, her remaining shifts on the cardiac wing had been canceled. "Sign here," the charge nurse said quietly. "It only confirms receipt." Clara's bandaged palm pressed against the paper. One signature could keep the matter small. Another statement, carefully softened, stripped of names, polished until no one important felt accused, might protect her schedule. Her phone vibrated again. "Ethan." This time, she answered. "Finally," he said over the clink of glassware and the muffled music still leaking through the gala ballroom downstairs. "You need to say you misunderstood what you saw. Vanessa and I will support that. Then we contain the hospital issue before it reaches the board." Clara looked through the glass wall at Adrian's room. His silhouette remained still beneath the blue pulse of the monitor. "You filed the complaint." Silence lasted half a breath too long. "I protected our future," Ethan replied. "Your little performance embarrassed people who fund this place." The gauze around Clara's hand tightened as her fingers curled. "My report will say exactly what happened. Then don't come home." The line went dead. No shouted insult followed. Only the low ventilation hum and the soft crackle of the incident form beneath her thumb. Clara pulled a fresh sheet from the clipboard. In precise handwriting, she documented the contraindicated medication, the physician's correction, Adrian's request, her refusal of preferential assignment, and the limited handoff approved by nursing supervision. She included Ethan's demand that she alter her account. Then she signed her full name. The charge nurse's mouth tightened. This could cost you more than a few shifts. Changing it would cost me the right to wear these scrubs. Clara removed her badge from the cardiac assignment board and returned it to the desk. The plastic was warm from her hand. Inside his room, Adrian had heard enough through the half-open door to understand the shape of the pressure, but he did not summon an administrator or reach for his phone. Clara had drawn a line around her profession. Rescuing her, without permission, would erase it. When she entered to complete the final chart check, his eyes moved to the badge no longer clipped beside her stethoscope. Did they remove you? Pending review. Because of me? Because someone believes money should decide what truth sounds like. Adrian's jaw hardened, but Clara closed the tablet before he could speak. You promised not to cost me more. I remember. Then let the record stand on its own. For several seconds, rain silvered the window behind him. Adrian gave one restrained nod. Clara turned toward the door. "And the coffee?" he asked. Her hand rested on the cool metal handle. "Tomorrow, 5 o'clock, off hospital property." The answer settled between them. Chosen, not purchased. Then the overhead speaker called Clara back to the emergency department, and she walked away carrying no wedding ring, no cardiac assignment, and no certainty that she still had a home. At the elevator, another message lit her screen. Formal review. 8 a.m. attendance mandatory. Across the corridor, Adrian watched the doors close and kept his promise not to interfere. But by morning, silence would demand a price from him too. Rain tapped the conference room windows at 7:58 a.m., soft as fingernails against glass, while the ventilation system breathed cold air over an untouched silver coffee service. Clara sat beneath the white fluorescent panels with her signed statement centered before her. Across the table, the charge nurse straightened a folder marked confidential. At precisely 8, the door opened, bringing in the scent of wet wool and cedar. Adrian Vale entered without an attorney, assistant, or donor relations escort. His charcoal suit was immaculate. The hospital identification band still circled his wrist. "Mr. Vale," the charge nurse said, rising. "This is an internal personnel review." "I know." Adrian placed a sealed envelope on the table, but did not sit. "And before anyone mistakes my presence for influence, Vale Meridian's counsel transmitted a binding notice at 7:45. Until this review concludes, I have suspended my authority over every pending donation to this hospital." The charge nurse's fingers stopped against the folder. Clara looked up. Adrian had not purchased her safety. He had removed his own leverage. "That includes the cardiac expansion grant?" the charge nurse asked. "All of it. No one can reward this hospital for clearing Nurse Clara, and no one can accuse me of threatening it if you do not." His voice remained level, almost glacial, but a pulse moved once along his jaw. Millions of dollars now stood beyond his reach, locked away by his own signature. Clara's report would have to survive without his fortune leaning on the scale. The charge nurse opened the envelope. Inside lay a notarized statement and a copy of Adrian's transfer record. "You were asked not to interfere," she said. "I'm not asking you to change a finding." Adrian's gaze settled on Clara, then returned to the charge nurse. "I'm accepting responsibility for my own conduct. I refuse transfer unless Nurse Clara accompanied me." She challenged that demand, established limits, and ensured the physician approved the handoff. "If someone wishes to call my behavior coercive, put my name on the complaint." "Not hers." Paper whispered beneath the charge nurse's hand. "Your statement may become part of the official record." "That is why I signed it." Clara rose, the chair legs scraping sharply across the polished floor. "You could lose the board partnership." "Yes." "And the expansion carrying your company's name." "Yes." No reassurance followed. No polished speech. Adrian merely stood in the refrigerated air, with rain darkening one shoulder of his coat, and waited for her judgment. "Why?" Clara asked. His eyes did not leave hers. "Because respecting your boundary did not require me to hide behind it." The clock clicked once. The charge nurse closed the folder and informed Clara that her suspension from the cardiac wing would remain until the committee ruled. Her honesty had not restored her assignment, and Adrian's statement had not erased the risk. But the complaint no longer described a nurse manipulating a donor. It now recorded a powerful patient admitting that she had resisted him. Outside the conference room, morning lights spilled pale gold across the linoleum. Adrian stopped beside the elevators, leaving several feet between them. "The coffee at 5 is still your choice," he said. Clara studied the hospital band at his wrist, then the empty space where an entourage should have been. "It is." The elevator chimed. Before its doors opened, the charge nurse hurried into the corridor, her face drained of color. "Mr. Vale, the board has called an emergency session. They want you there at noon." Adrian did not turn toward her. Clara watched his reflection sharpen in the stainless steel doors as the next price of choosing her arrived. "Tell them I'll attend," he said. Then his gaze met Clara's in the metal. "And tell them I'm coming without my checkbook." At 5 o'clock, the hospital cafe smelled of scorched espresso and lemon disinfectant, while sleet whispered against the darkening windows. Clara arrived in plain clothes, her nursing badge tucked inside her coat and her bandaged palm curled around the strap of her bag. Adrian was already waiting at a corner table. No assistant, no security, no tailored jacket shielding him from scrutiny. Only a charcoal sweater, the hospital band still circling his wrist, and 2 untouched cups between them. "I didn't order yours," he said. "I remembered you prefer choosing for yourself." Clara bought a small coffee and sat opposite him. For several breaths, the espresso machine hissed louder than either of them. Then Adrian slid nothing across the table. No flowers, no jeweled box, no offer disguised as generosity. "The board asked me to restore my donation authority," he said. "In exchange, they wanted my statement withdrawn until your review was finished." Clara's fingers stilled against the warm paper cup. "What did you tell them?" "No." The answer landed without decoration. "They suspended negotiations with Vale Meridian. My directors meet tonight to decide whether I remain chairman." He had not paid with money. He had paid with control, the one thing men like Adrian Vale were rumored never to surrender. Clara studied the faint crease beside his mouth and the untouched tea cooling near his hand. "You shouldn't lose your company because of me." "I'm not doing it because of you." His gaze held hers across the scratched laminate. "I'm doing it because they asked me to purchase silence, and I recognize the price." Her phone vibrated. Ethan's name burned across the screen, followed by a message. "If you meet him, don't bother coming home. Vanessa will confirm everything I say." The cafe's refrigeration unit clicked on, sending a low mechanical shudder beneath their feet. Adrian saw Clara turn the phone face down, but he did not ask to read it. He did not reach across the table. "Do you need somewhere safe tonight? I need to stop letting other people decide what my choices mean." Clara lifted the phone again. This time, her thumb moved without trembling. She opened a message to Ethan and typed, "I will collect my belongings with a third-party present. Do not contact my workplace." Then she sent it. The small blue confirmation looked almost ordinary. It was not. Home, marriage, and a last illusion of reconciliation slipped beyond retrieval with one quiet tap. Adrian's hand tightened once around his cup. "I have a furnished apartment near the hospital," he said carefully. "It can be placed in your name for as long as you need. No conditions." Clara shook her head. That would turn kindness into another debt. Then no apartment. No offense sharpened his face. He simply accepted the boundary. Clara glanced through the steamed glass at the bus lights smearing gold across the wet street. "You can walk me to the hotel across from the hospital," she said. Nothing more. For the first time, warmth reached Adrian's eyes before it touched his mouth. Outside, the sleet had hardened into silver needles. He opened his umbrella, then angled it toward Clara until one shoulder of his sweater darkened with rain. He never touched her. He only matched her pace, slowing when her tired steps shortened, standing on the traffic side as taxis sprayed dirty water over the curb. At the hotel entrance, Clara noticed the damp wool clinging to his shoulder. She unwound her scarf and held it out. "You'll freeze, and you'll need it tomorrow." "Tonight," she said, placing it over his arm. "I decide who gets to be cared for." Adrian looked down at the soft gray fabric, as if no gift had ever cost him more. Before he could answer, the charge nurse pushed through the revolving door, breathless, carrying a sealed hospital envelope. "Clara, the board moved your ruling to tomorrow morning." Her eyes shifted to Adrian. "And Ethan has demanded to address the entire review committee in person." The lobby's piano fell silent between songs. Clara took the envelope, its paper edged hard against her bandage. Tomorrow, the man who betrayed her would no longer be threatening her from behind a phone. He would be waiting beneath the hospital's brightest lights. Fluorescent light washed the review chamber in a colorless glare, catching on stainless steel water pitchers and the polished hospital seal behind the committee. Through the glass wall, nurses, physicians, and administrators filled the corridor, their voices reduced to a low, restless hum. Clara entered in navy scrubs, the bandage on her palm bright against the folder she carried. Ethan was already seated beneath the brightest ceiling panel. His charcoal suit looked freshly pressed. Vanessa was nowhere beside him. "My wife has been under considerable emotional strain," he began when the chair recognized him. "Her attachment to Mr. Vale affected her judgment, and after our marital disagreement, she constructed accusations to protect herself." Clara did not move. The air conditioning lifted one loose strand of hair against her cheek. Ethan placed printed messages on the table and spoke of instability, professional obsession, and a powerful patient exploiting a vulnerable nurse. Each sentence arrived polished smooth, as if compassion could disguise ownership. Then he leaned toward the microphone. "Vanessa can corroborate everything." The committee chair adjusted her glasses. Ms. Vanessa Cole declined to appear or submit a sworn statement. A murmur traveled beyond the glass. Ethan's hand tightened around his pen. "Then allow me to explain what she would have said." "No," Clara said. The single word silenced the room. She stood without looking toward Adrian, who waited in the rear row with her gray scarf folded over his arm. Clara opened her folder and slid 3 documents across the cold table. Ethan's threatening texts, her time-stamped incident report, and the witness confirmation for retrieving her belongings. "My marriage is ending," she said, her voice level. "But that is not evidence of clinical misconduct." These are his exact words. They show an attempt to make housing and professional support conditional upon a false statement. Ethan pushed back his chair. Its metal feet shrieked across the tile. "Private messages taken out of context. I sent them to hospital counsel before this hearing," Clara continued. "I waive confidentiality for these messages." "Read them aloud." That choice cost more than embarrassment. It placed the ruins of her home beneath institutional light, where colleagues could measure every threat. The chair read Ethan's words into the record. "Come home and fix your statement. Vanessa will support my version. Refuse, and you no longer have a home here." Behind the glass, the corridor went still. Ethan's practiced expression broke first at the mouth. Adrian remained seated. He did not interrupt, purchase silence, or reach for Clara's battle. He only held her scarf, his knuckles pale against the soft wool. The emergency physician then confirmed Clara had prevented a dangerous contraindication. The charge nurse verified that Clara had insisted on protocol during Adrian's transfer. By the time the final statement was entered, Ethan's version had collapsed without Vanessa, without evidence, and without Clara protecting his reputation. The committee cleared Clara of misconduct and restored her cardiac wing shifts effective immediately. A second ruling followed. Ethan's coercive communications would be referred for an independent ethics review. The corridor erupted, not in applause, but in the sharp release of held breath. Clara gathered her papers and walked past Ethan. "You destroyed us for him," he whispered. She stopped. "No, you destroyed us when you believed my dependence was the same as my consent." At the doors, Adrian rose and offered her scarf back, rather than placing it around her shoulders. Clara accepted it herself, Before either could speak, a board secretary approached with a sealed black envelope. "Mr. Vale, the Vale Meridian directors have completed their emergency vote." Adrian broke the seal. His eyes moved once across the page, then settled on Clara. By standing beside the truth, he had lost the chairmanship he had spent 20 years building. The letter gave him until noon to surrender control, or publicly challenge the board and risk losing the company with it. The elevator doors opened onto Vale Meridian's executive floor with a muted chime, releasing a breath of chilled air scented with cedar and polished leather. Beyond the smoke-glass walls, the city burned silver beneath the noon sun. Clara stepped out beside Adrian, her folded scarf resting over one arm, while directors gathered around a black marble table at the far end of the boardroom. A digital clock above the doors changed to 11:52. "You have 8 minutes," the lead director said, sliding a surrender agreement across the stone. The paper stopped beneath Adrian's hand. "Sign it," and he would retain his shares, his office, and a ceremonial position bearing the Vale name. "Refuse," and the directors would activate the removal clause, freeze his voting rights, and force the sale of the company he had built over 20 years. Adrian reached for the pen. Clara closed her fingers around it first. The soft click against the table drew every gaze. "Before you choose," she said, "tell me whether any part of this is for me." His jaw tightened. "They used what happened to you as leverage." "That wasn't my question." The ventilation whispered overhead. Somewhere below, a horn sounded through the glass and vanished into the city noise. Adrian looked at the agreement, then at her. "I thought losing the company would prove I wouldn't abandon you when it became expensive." Clara placed the pen down between them. "If you burn down your life to keep me warm, one day I'll become another debt you think I owe." No one interrupted. Her nursing badge caught a blade of sunlight as she drew herself upright. "I will not be the reason you surrender your future, and I will not become the reward for your sacrifice." The clock turned to 11:55. Adrian's expression did not soften, but something in his posture did. The rigid stillness of a man accustomed to carrying every decision alone finally giving way. "Then what are you asking me to do?" "Choose what remains true even if I walk away." Clara stepped back from the table. She did not take his hand. She did not promise to stay. Adrian stared at the surrender agreement until the final minute began blinking red. Then he uncapped the pen and struck one clean line through the signature field. The lead director rose. "Think carefully. Once noon passes, there is no reinstatement, no negotiated exit, and no guarantee you retain Vale Meridian." Adrian turned the document over and wrote across its blank back. "I decline surrender. I invoke my right to present the decision directly to the shareholders." At noon, the wall clock sounded once. Heavy. Final. The company council collected the paper, and Adrian removed the chairman's pin from his lapel. Instead of setting it before the directors, he closed it inside his fist. "My authority came from building this company," he said, "not from obeying people who mistake coercion for loyalty." The directors filed out beneath the low hum of recessed lights, leaving the unsigned agreement on the marble like a sealed grave. Adrian had kept his right to fight, but control of Vale Meridian would now be decided publicly. Clara crossed the room only after the doors shut. From her bag, she took a compact blood pressure cuff and held it out. "Seat." One eyebrow lifted. "Is that a request?" "Professional judgment." The leather chair creaked beneath him. She wrapped the cuff around his arm, her fingers precise against the crisp fabric of his sleeve. His pulse beat fast beneath her touch. "You didn't have to come," he said. Clara watched the gauge settle. "You cared for me without purchasing the right to be needed. I can care for you without surrendering the right to leave." The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but warmer than one. A phone vibrated across the table. The shareholder notice had already gone out. An emergency vote would be held the following morning. Clara loosened the cuff and returned his arm to him as carefully as she had taken it. Adrian faced the bright city beyond the glass, no longer chairman, not yet defeated. Behind him, Clara remained by choice. Tomorrow, the world would learn whether Vale Meridian still belonged to him. Tonight, They would have to discover what tenderness looked like when neither of them owed the other anything. Rain traced silver veins down the executive windows while the shareholder vote sounded through the conference speakers, first as numbers, then as silence. The room smelled of cedar, black coffee, and the faint metallic chill of conditioned air. Adrian stood at the end of the table without a chairman's seal before him, one hand resting beside the unsigned resignation the board had demanded. Clara waited near the glass wall, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her scarf folded over the chair between them. The motion to remove Adrian Vale has failed, the corporate secretary announced. The independent shareholders have rejected the board's conditions and reinstated him as chairman, effective immediately. Applause rose from the screen, restrained at first, then thunderous. Adrian did not reach for the seal when an assistant returned it. Instead, he looked at Clara. She had stayed through the night, checking his blood pressure, bringing water, and making him rest when the city lights blurred before his eyes. Now that the danger had passed, she lifted her bag. "My shift begins at 7. A car is waiting downstairs," he said. "Only if it takes me to the hospital." Adrian nodded once. No persuasión. No velvet cage disguised as generosity. At the hospital, morning sunlight spilled across the polished floors, warming the antiseptic air. The charge nurse met Clara outside the cardiac wing and handed her the committee's final ruling. Ethan's testimony had been rejected. The complaint was dismissed, Clara's suspension was erased, and a formal correction would be placed in her personnel file. Ethan had also withdrawn the last of his claims after learning Vanessa would not risk perjury before the committee. Clara read the page without smiling. Then she signed the acknowledgement, returned the pen, and stepped through the cardiac wing doors. Monitors chimed. Rubber saws whispered over linoleum. A frightened patient reached for her hand, and Clara took it without hesitation. By evening, Ethan was waiting near the staff exit beneath the hard white glow of the parking structure. Her belongings sat in sealed boxes beside him. "You really threw away a marriage for this?" he asked. Clara placed her wedding ring on top of the final box. "No, you threw it away. I stopped carrying it." She signed a receipt witnessed by hospital security, lifted the smallest box, and walked past him. Adrian waited beside a black sedan, but he did not open its door. He held out no key, no contract, no promise wrapped in ownership. "Dinner?" he asked. "My apartment?" Clara countered. "The one I leased this afternoon. You may bring dessert." For the first time, his smile arrived without restraint. Months later, the cardiac expansion opened under a new ethics charter separating donor money from clinical review. Clara accepted a promotion she had earned, not one Adrian could arrange. He learned her shifts, kept coffee warm without asking where she had been, and sent meals to the nurse's station on nights she forgot to eat. When she needed silence, he gave it. When he missed her, he said so. And when he finally offered her a ring in the small kitchen of the home she had chosen for herself, he left the box open on the table and placed both hands at his sides. Clara studied the pale morning light on the stone, then closed the box gently. "Not yet." Adrian kissed her forehead. "Then not yet." She took his hand and led him toward the coffee growing cold by the window. She had not traded one man's betrayal for another man's protection. She had chosen a love that never asked her to disappear in order to keep it.